All right, I think we'll get started. It's 12 o'clock. I'm Tracy Kleckel Jimenez, and I'm the coordinator for Cultural Thursdays. So if you have any ideas and would like to see me after the program, I'm really happy today to have Abby Eden, former student of mine, a very good student, mind you, who, when I look at her posts on Facebook, I'm like, wait, that's not fair. She's gone here now, and she's gone here now. She's traveled quite a bit through the Spanish-speaking world and has had some great opportunities to meet people in the Spanish-speaking world and to serve in teaching English, correct? So she's got some pictures to show you, and she's going to share about her story. Please turn off your cell phones so they're not a distraction. And we'll have some time at the end for questions. We typically do not have a Cultural Thursday in January, but this year we have a student who spent some time as an au pair in Australia, and she has J-term, and she would really like to speak about this experience. So she will be here on January 17th, Thursday the 17th. That's the first week of spring semester. And then in February, we have Scott Foster's daughter, Meg, who is speaking on Russia and her time in Russia. I think it was 9 weeks she was in Russia studying. She's an studies astrophysics, I believe. So please join me in welcoming Abby Eden.
Thank you. Thank you for coming here today. I'm so excited to be able to share about this experience that is so special to me, my time I spent with the Peace Corps in Colombia. This is a picture of me in Cartagena, one of the coastal cities that's probably most famous in Colombia. And it's known for its wall. It was a fort city, along with the Colombian flag. My goal for today's session is this. I will share my experiences and the lessons I've learned as a Peace Corps volunteer in Colombia while fulfilling the third goal of the Peace Corps, which is to help promote a better understanding of other peoples on the part of Americans. A little bit about me. Tracy gave me a little introduction, but I'll give you a little more info. I graduated from Staples Motley High School in 2010 and really started learning Spanish there in 9th grade and took all 4 years there, Spanish 3 and 4 through college and schools with CLC. So that was a great experience as well, and where I first got interested in Spanish. I graduated from Bethel University in 2014 with degrees in Spanish, Spanish education, and teaching English as a second language. Just had to fit them all in. Currently, I am working as a Spanish teacher at Little Falls Community Schools and Swanville Public Schools. I spend half my time at each. I love half-hour comedies, traveling, Diet Pepsi, and Laffy Taffies. Just little things about me. In high school, I really started getting this desire to travel, and I knew that Bethel had this great program going to Guatemala. And so this was my first experience abroad other than Canada, and it was partially studying language in the city of Antigua, surrounded by volcanoes, a beautiful colonial city, and half the time volunteering in a small town called Magdalena, El Gorrion. And it was a wonderful experience for one semester. I encourage anyone, if you have an opportunity to study abroad, it's such an amazing experience. But this was my first introduction to life abroad, and I knew after coming back that I wanted to go again. I completed college. I did my student teaching in Spanish and ESL. Coincidentally, I didn't have the best Spanish teaching experience with student teaching. A lot of things made it difficult, so I kind of leaned into ESL, English as a second language, which I enjoyed as well, but I was able to get a job teaching at Long Prairie Gray Eagle Elementary, which has a large Spanish-speaking population, for a long-term sub position. And even before I started that position, I thought, how can I get abroad? Where should I go next? And so I felt a lingering desire to continue studying Spanish and exploring in Latin America. So I decided I'm going to apply for the Peace Corps. So I'm going to talk, I have a lot of info. I'm going to try to skim it a little more because you can simply search peacecorps.gov and get all of this info because that's where I got it. But I want to share a little more about my experience, but it's good to have a background of what is Peace Corps? Why am I going to Columbia? So the Peace Corps is a service opportunity for motivated change makers to immerse themselves in a community abroad, working side by side with local leaders to tackle the most pressing challenges of our generation. So the goals are the history of Peace Corps is here on the right. It was established in March 1st, 1961 by President John F. Kennedy. He has a famous speech from the University of Michigan calling students to serve. And so he established the Peace Corps that would meet goal number 1, to help the people of interested countries in meeting their need for trained men and women. So they would collaborate with countries. Over the years, they've served in 141 countries, and over 230,000 Americans have served. The second goal of Peace Corps is to help promote a better understanding of Americans on the part of the people served, so that cultural competence of American culture. And 3, to help promote a better understanding of other peoples on the part of Americans, which is what my goal is for us today. Peace Corps volunteers, what do? They live and work alongside the people they serve, collaborating with local governments, schools, small businesses, and entrepreneurs to create sustainable, community-based projects that address local development priorities across 6 sectors. So the requirements for volunteers, they serve for 2 years, following 3 months of in-country training. And I will tell you now, so you're not surprised later, I did not stay 2 years. I only ended up staying about 6 months. So don't be surprised later. At any time you can decide to leave, but the commitment is 2 years and 3 months, so 27 months. You receive a living allowance to live similarly to people in their community, receive medical and dental care, transportation. You must be a U.S. citizen, and there's no upper age limit, but you must be at least 18 years old. These are the sectors that volunteers work in, mostly in education, which is what I did. There's also health, youth development, community economic development, environment, agriculture, and then a small sector called Peace Corps Response, which is for volunteers who have already served or who have a lot of experience in their field to do shorter terms, like a year instead of the full 2 years. Where volunteers served, it's a little hard to see, but most of volunteers serve in Africa with 46%, and the rest are spread across the world. So here's my Peace Corps pre-departure process. This is one of the ads that they use to recruit Peace Corps volunteers. Make America a better place, leave the country. So that's what I wanted to do. The Peace Corps application process is quite extensive. You apply, you have health history forms, you choose what countries you want. Before probably 5 years ago, you did not have a choice. You would apply and they would give you whatever they wanted. Maybe they would take your input, but it was a surprise. And with mine, I got to pick my top 3. And now, if you apply, you actually pick what opening you want and apply for that specific one. Then you interview on the phone. Might be a few interview steps. Then you receive an invitation. You have to get medical clearance, quite a few vaccines, tests, a lot of legal clearance as well. Had to get fingerprints sent off and everything like that before you can leave. So after doing all of those things, I got invited. This is a screenshot of the email that I got, and I was so excited. It says, "Dear Abby, congratulations. On behalf of the entire Peace Corps family, I'm delighted to invite you to serve as a Peace Corps volunteer in Colombia. You've been selected to serve as a Teaching English for Livelihoods trainer in the Teachers College, departing August 26, 2015. Now, I got that in probably December 2014. About 2 months later, I got an email that said, "Oh, we're going to delay it. You're not going to leave till January 6, 2016. So from the time I applied to the time I left was actually about a year and a half, which is atypical, but I had to wait. This is more of a pre-departure checklist, what you have to do, but it's mostly medical and legal steps. Okay, so my service finally started after I celebrated the most American of things, going to Disney World with my mom. I decided, or it was time to go to Colombia. And so we got our materials, got my favorite drink, well, second favorite, Coca-Cola Light in Colombia, and was ready to start learning, start training. So in January 2016, I'm here. I landed in Colombia. This is one of the volunteers that was there already in the previous group. We had a training in Miami. That was just about 1 day, and our last chance to escape. I met my cohort, which was C28, and it was called C2 because Colombia was one of the first countries in the 1960s to receive volunteers, and they had volunteers working until the early 80s, but in the 80s and 90s, Colombia was very unstable. There was a lot of violence, and so they had to suspend the program. And so about 2010, 2012, they restarted this English program, and so that's why it's called C2, Colombia 2, and we were the 8th group. So I traveled to Barranquilla, Colombia, in the department of Atlántico. Barranquilla is famous for being the home of Shakira and Sofia Vergara, and they're very proud of Shakira especially. This is my cohort. We are 29 people from all over the United States. It was really interesting to even be with volunteers from all over the US because you think, yeah, we're from the same country, but it's just some of the cultural linguistic things that they would say. Like my friend Mia from Philadelphia would call every sandwich a hoagie. And it's just funny things like that where it's like immersion within an immersion experience. So there were 29 of us to start. So our program was Practical English for Success, which was different than the invitation said, but just different wording. So we started 3 months of training. Volunteers would be living with host families in rural towns in the department of Atlántico. And when we think rural, we think, you know, Nimrod or Pillager, like those are rural towns, right? The city I lived in, the town I lived in, was 20,000 people, and it was considered rural around, sometimes they called them peri-urban. It was basically a suburb, but it was called Sabana Grande, and I'll show you that, but we were going to be living in those towns for our training. We would complete 3 months of training in language, Spanish language, culture, safety and security, technical matters, medical issues, and sustainable development. Because it's a government program, they had a ton of rules and a ton of restrictions for us because they were responsible for us. Volunteers were required to complete field experiences in their towns, which included co-teaching with one or more counterparts in a local public school and initiating other community projects. So this is a map of Colombia in South America for your reference, and then on the right was where I lived. Atlántico is this very small department, state, where we did all of our training. Eventually, when we got our site placements, we moved a little bit out to 4 departments there on the Caribbean coast. So after our first week of training, I met my host family. These are the Salas Montero family. I lived with my host mom, Marta, and host dad, Rafael. They lived with, or also living with them was their daughter, Camila, who at the time was about 19 and a college student. Here we have their grandkids who live with them. Their mom works in Bogota, and they live with their grandparents full-time, Omar and Valeria. And then their daughter was visiting. She also lives, that's their aunt, the kid's aunt. She also lives in Bogota. So we were required to live with host families for our safety and security is what we were told, all throughout training and all throughout our site placements after training. What else? We got a stipend. We would pay them rent and food costs throughout training. We could negotiate if we wanted to pay more. I got really lucky because Marta is a fantastic cook, and so I didn't cook for like 3 months straight, and it was great. So this is my host pueblo. Pueblo, we would usually call a town in Spanish. I would call it a city because 20,000 people, it's pretty big for us. This is Sabana Grande. Most towns are known for their plazas in the middle of town with a big Catholic church, since it's majority Catholic in Colombia. What I loved about Sabana Grande is all the flowers. I went in January, and here it's just dark and gray, and every street was lined with flowers. It was so beautiful. My first impressions, though, it was so hot. It was so hot. It was in the high 80s every day and humid. And this area was prone to blackouts. The electricity would go out. And so when the electricity goes out, the fan turns off. And that could be difficult. So amazingly, most Colombians wear pants all the time. And we volunteers were like, how can you wear pants? It's so hot. But I would like to say that I got used to it. And I did a little bit, but it was just very hot. Training, we had 8 hours of training every day, 5 days a week. And it could be so boring sometimes, just sitting in lectures. You know, if you're students, you can get bored sometimes. But we were learning, and it was all important information. Colombians talk so fast sometimes. Colombians are known for having pretty clear Spanish, especially in the inland, like Bogota, the capital, and Medellin. But Colombian coastal Spanish, they call costeñol, coastal Spanish, is it's a whole other beast. I felt like partially learning another language because I had learned so much in Guatemala, but that was different. They often speak really quickly. A few phrases that I had to learn. No dar papaya, which literally means don't give papayas. And it means don't flash your possessions. Don't keep your phone out on the bus. Somebody might try to take it. Don't flash your wallet. Just keep a little bit of cash in your pocket. Things like that to be smart and out of trouble. Que bacano. Que bacano means how cool, how awesome. Also, que chévere is more common, but this is very coastal. Que bacano. Que más is how you say what's up, means what more? what more? And one of the funniest ones that does not translate well is mamando gallo, which kind of means like sucking on a rooster, or yeah. And it just means you're joking around. Like, don't worry, I was just mamando gallo. I was just joking with you. So it was kind of like its own Spanish language that I was relearning. moving on to February, my life as a trainee. I started working at this school called INSTEC. The schools were really unique, compared to schools here. All the students wore uniforms. Schools were very open. They'd have trees because it was so hot. They would often, on those days when the electricity would go out, the fans weren't working, the schools were unbearable. They would send kids home because it was too hot. And Colombia is known and kind of prides themselves on having holidays, having a lot of national holidays, and so we would get school days off quite a bit. This is my counterpart in Sabana Grande, Marla. She was a English teacher there, and she was actually going for her master's, and she had studied a little bit in the United States, and that's another volunteer. We both worked with her to give a few Spanish lessons. I think we only ended up doing like 3 over that time. But what was challenging for me coming from the United States, working in schools, is that everything was a lot, you're supposed to follow the curriculum, you're supposed to follow a textbook, and it was kind of like, okay, what are we going to do today? Let's just make it up. And that was a little stressful for me, trying to plan. I'm more of like independent work person anyway, and so planning with other people gave me some anxiety. But it was fun to meet the students and get to know them a little bit. The biggest thing, most exciting part about February, and perhaps my experience in Colombia overall, was Carnaval. Carnaval is a festival that you celebrate right before Lent every year. It's known, especially in Rio de Janeiro. Is it Rio? Yeah. Brazil as being the biggest carnaval in the world. Well, Barranquilla, Colombia, has the second biggest. And the country stops. Everything is carnaval. Everyone gets involved, and they celebrate. So I'm wearing today my carnaval shirt that I'm wearing up here, and my sombrero volteado. This is a traditional hat this very traditional Colombian hat, earrings to show carnival traditions. And there's so many different characters, different history of the indigenous people mixed with African slaves, mixed with the Spanish, all their traditions coming together to celebrate Carnival. And so here I have, with one other volunteer, Natalie, who's actually from Minnesota, my host mom in the back, and my host sister. We were taking pictures with this frame with the Carnival slogan, "Quien lo vive es quien lo goza." He who lives it, enjoys it, or you live it, you love it. Carnaval. So, a few pictures of Carnaval. Every town has their reina, or their queen. And so this was our queen in Sabana Grande with my language group there. Every day we had language training in addition to our training with safety and security. And so this was my group based on language proficiency. We would divide into groups based on our level. And so we met with La Reina, the queen that day, and our language teacher down there, Jaime, is wearing a traditional sombrero volteado hat. Here, you see a Reina, not the same one, she's from a different town, where in the parade. So the biggest thing with Carnaval are the parades. So every weekend, they would even have leading up to Carnaval in January, pre-Carnaval parades in the small towns. So we would go watch parades. We'd have floats with La Reina dancing to super loud music all day in these fancy outfits. You would see groups of dancers called comparsas. They would have a variety of dances. You can see this is some kind of centipede or insect of some kind. More traditional dances would be like these, dancing all up in the streets for hours. This is a character, this man is a character called a garabato, I believe. And he, could you imagine walking for hours in 90-degree heat wearing this and dancing? I just think it would be better to be wearing one of the skimpier outfits. But it's a very traditional dance. And also the cumbia. Cumbia is a very traditional Colombian dance. Women would often put bottles, these look like Gatorade bottles, on their heads while they dance in the street. Others would have like bottles of rum or liquor on their heads while they danced. And I didn't see any breaks, so they must be pretty good. And the observers would end up looking like this. So this is me with my host niece, Valeria. The strangest thing, but it was so fun, the Colombians would throw cornstarch at people, at you. Like, it was called maicena. And to celebrate, that's what they would throw, cornstarch everywhere. And it got all over, but it was just what they did. They do it at birthday parties, at parades, things like that. And so we were covered in maicena. They would also sell toys and balloons and bubbles, foam sprayers. It was just an all-out party. And as you can see, a lot of people watching in the background. It's so Colombia, Carnaval, on the coast at least. So it was definitely one of the highlights of my service, going to Carnaval. So as that continued, I had more training. We took an excursion to Barranquilla. Barranquilla is a city of about a little over 1 million people, so it is quite large. It's a port city. Not usually a tourist destination, but we lived a half-hour bus ride from there, so we would go in whatever chance we got because they had more stores, more things to do. But we didn't have that much money, so we stayed a lot. This is again my language group at a cathedral. Some typical Colombian life things I'd like to share with you now. So starting with food, to the left we have a bandeja paisa. This is more of a special dish, but kind of similar to what I would get on a normal day. This has 3 types of meat. Normally you just have type of meat, a big pile of white rice, and either fried plantains like you see in the corner, or avocado, big avocados, not like the Haas avocados, like they're huge avocados. And that would be a typical meal that I would get at my host family. Like I said, I really liked my host mom's cooking. I had a friend who just didn't really get along with her host mom, and she got liver like 4 times a week, and I felt so bad for her. But it was just that a little like communication breakdown that it was just hard to tell her, like to tell her host mom, stop giving me liver, I don't like it. So eventually, yeah, she ended up moving out. Well, she endured the 3 months training and instead of getting into a fight. But to the right was one of my favorite Colombian dishes, Colombian fast food. It's called salchipapas. Salchipapas are a bottom layer of French fries with slice of hot dogs. On top, you've got lettuce and like chow mein noodles with Colombian costeño cheese, with as many sauces as you'd like. There's always ketchup, always mayo, and always pineapple sauce. And I swear it's really good. I am a picky eater, but it's good. And anytime you ask for fish, this is what it would look like. My fish was always looking at me, and I just wanted like a fillet. No. It was, since we were near the ocean, you could get mojarra, is called, quite often. And this is what it would look like. You had to dig around the bones. And it was pretty good, but just looking at it was kind of off-putting to me. We'd have coconut rice And these are called, these yellow things are called patacones. They take plantain, smash it up, and fry it. Put some salt on there. They're really good. So to the right, we have our main form of transportation in our towns called motocarro. A motocarro is a motorcycle with like a carriage in the back. You could pay 1,000 pesos, which would be about 30 cents, 33 cents, to get from one place to another in town. It was considered informal work, but it was super convenient. Volunteers ended up walking a lot, and a lot of Colombians would be like, why don't you take a motocarro? You're going to get too tired. It's too hot. But we wanted to save money, or we didn't want to wait on people. So we took a motocarro quite often. This is my host family's home. I felt very fortunate to live with this family. They were not well off by any means, they were just a typical family, but they had a yard, and others just had like a patio. Some just had a like little tile space, and that was considered their outside space. And so it was really nice to have this yard. And one of my favorite parts was the 3 palm trees that they had planted in their yard. You don't see a lot of palm trees in this town. It's not that close to the water, but it made it feel like I was kind of at the beach, which I enjoyed. Colombian life involved riding the bus a lot. And here, growing up in Minnesota, you have to have a car or you cannot. It's really hard to get around, right? So I've been used to driving everywhere my whole life. And that was a struggle for me in Colombia. I didn't want to take the bus. It was always crowded. It was always hot. And the seats had like this much room. And I'm already short, and it was uncomfortable. So my tall friends really didn't like it. But it was very different having to rely on public transportation. My host family didn't have a car. Most people in town didn't own cars. They would always take the bus. One thing that we'd see quite often are iguanas around. It was especially funny being at school. There were some trees in the courtyard, and all of a sudden you'd hear a group of girls like scream and run away. You're like, what's happened? What happened? And an iguana would pee, and they would run away from the shower from up in the tree. So it was fun seeing that. You don't see many iguanas here in Minnesota. So as my time continued, keep doing training in March. It was 3 months training. I spent a lot of time with my host family, really got to know them and connect with them. My host mom, Martha, one of her dreams was to have a mariachi band at her birthday party, and finally her husband hired one. And mariachi is Mexican, but it's very popular, traditional music all through Latin America. And so this Colombian mariachi came to our house and serenaded Martha, and she loved it. And it was such a fun experience. We also had a cousin get married, and my friend Natalie, she lived with a cousin of my family, so we went to a lot of events together and got to know these folks and have a lot of fun and kind of integrating into the community. That's a big Peace Corps goal, is integration, getting to know your community and becoming friends with them. So that being said, at this time during training, we were living in towns with other volunteers. When we moved, that wasn't always the case. Sometimes you were by yourself in a town. So we really took advantage of time spent with our fellow trainees, with the Americans being trained in. And we were really a support system, for sure. Through all the difficult times, we had each other, and I'm really thankful to have these friends that I made really special in that time and what I needed in that time. We would go out sometimes, just go out to get pizza, Colombian pizza. It's not that good. It needs more sauce. It's like all cheese and all bread, barely any sauce. So as time went on, April, we got our site placements after we finished training, finished all of those language tests that we had to do. We had to reach a certain proficiency. Otherwise, you'd have to either, they said you would have to go home, or I think they would just give you an extra tutor or something. But I didn't have to worry about that because I've taken so much Spanish. But we received our site placements. And so this is me and my friend Mia. She was one of my closest friends in Colombia in our training group. And this is the day we got our site assignments, and we were working at the same school. We got placed in Santa Marta, which is a beautiful city on the beach with a population of about 400,000 people. And so we were going to be moving to Santa Marta, working at a school there with us two and actually two other volunteers, one about our same age and one who was actually in her early 60s. We had one woman in her 60s, one in her 40s, and then the rest, maybe 50s, and the rest were in their 20s, early 30s. So we got our site placements, and then we swore in as Peace Corps volunteers. We took an oath, and we dedicated or committed to serving the U.S. government and the Colombian government in a ceremony. And there I am with my host mom, Marta. She came to support me with my certificate. So in April, I left Sabana Grande, and at this time, I had like a photo shoot with my host family. We really became close, and a lot of other pictures, our eyes are red because we were crying, and it's probably the strongest connection I have to Colombia is this family. They were just such a support for me and just really made my service what it was. In May, then, I moved to Santa Marta, or the end of April, early May. I moved to Santa Marta, Magdalena, Colombia. This was only two-ish hour drive from where I was before, maybe 3. But with public transportation, took a while and cost money. So I didn't go back to visit very often, but I moved to Santa Marta, Colombia. I began working at La Escuela Normal Superior María Auxiliadora de Santa Marta. It's quite a mouthful, but what it is a all-girls public Catholic school, which is foreign to us in the U.S. But it was actually a pretty prestigious school, known as a Normal, which had a teacher's college teacher's training program post high school. And so you can see the girls doing a special program, special like coordinated dance. They do things like that a lot in schools where they would have a special program, students would do things. Here they're doing a dance for the yellow butterflies referenced in Gabriel Garcia Marquez literature. Very cultural Colombian references there. At this time, I didn't really, for a variety of reasons, I was very stressed. I was stressed with work. I didn't really know what to do. We were supposed to observe, and I just wasn't excited about teaching English. I didn't know what I was going to teach. It was difficult to plan, and some teachers wanted to work with us, but a lot didn't, and they had already worked with other volunteers, and it was just kind of confusing for me. My new host family, I just got so lucky with my first host family. They were so great. I felt uncomfortable in my second home, and we couldn't live on our own, which probably would have made a huge difference in my service, but I ended up going to McDonald's a lot because I didn't feel comfortable in the kitchen. I didn't feel comfortable at home. I just wanted to stay in my room. And culture shock was really hitting me bad at this time when I moved to Santa Marta. Some other rules and restrictions that were frustrating. Peace Corps and the government wants us to be as safe as possible. Okay, so if you're getting around Santa Marta, a city of 400,000 people, you want to at least take a bus, right? Take a bus to go wherever. There's buses everywhere. Well, Peace Corps tells us the bus is too unsafe. Okay, well, can I ride a bike? No, that's too unsafe. Can I have a car? No, that's too unsafe. You can't have your own car. Well, how do I get around? Well, you have to call this taxi company and wait for them to come pick you up, and then we'll give you a slip to give them a voucher. So every time you go anywhere, you have to call a taxi. Okay, and you can't walk because then it's too far. So there were just a lot of things that were frustrating for me, mixed with my culture shock that were affecting my mental and physical health. And also me coping with going to McDonald's and KFC whenever I could because I just needed something from home. So I ended up, at this time, after about 6 months, I decided I'm going to go home. So I started what's called the ET process, the early termination process. And all throughout my service, the trainers gave us this, what's called the cycle of vulnerability and adjustment. And so it's supposed to be kind of a pattern of volunteer feelings in general, emotional experiences over time. And so I was at about 5-6 month range. And you can see that that is low, like one of the lowest points in a volunteer service. And what I think pushed me over the edge is that I went home during May to my brother's wedding and had the most amazing time. And then I came back and I was alone in a host family, uncomfortable with not having the freedoms that I wanted. And so I decided, you know, I don't really like my school experience. I don't think I can switch host families. I think it's just time for me to go. And so that's what I did. I decided to early terminate, and I decided to leave Columbia. And it was a big pride thing for me. I thought about it for quite a while, and I didn't want to be the first person to leave out of my group. But I was. I was the first to leave. 2 had been asked to leave, so at this point there were 27, and I was the first to voluntarily leave. But that being said, I went back to reality when I came home. I early terminated for a variety of reasons. Like I said, I experienced some reverse culture shock and situational depression when I came back. But to me, it was not as bad as that last month that I was in Columbia. I accepted a job teaching ESL in Little Falls. These are some of my students from last year. And I spent time with family and friends to recover and return to normalcy. So I want to wrap up with just a few things, my biggest takeaways from my experience in Columbia, what I learned, what was most impactful to me. This is me at my swearing-in ceremony. I don't like teaching English. It took me 3 years of teaching ESL in K-12 schools and months abroad to figure out that I just don't really like it, that I like the students. I love learning from students of different cultures, different languages, but I don't like teaching English. This was my English community class, and I just felt so much anxiety going into it. And I just don't like teaching English. Travel enriches life so much. So many of my fellow volunteers would tell me stories about how they lived in Korea for a year, or how they backpacked through Central America. And I never had friends around here that did that. People would go to, Florida on vacation, and that was about it. I didn't really have role models for doing that, even though I knew I wanted to travel. But hearing their stories kind of encouraged me, like, they can travel, I could do it, I could go by myself. So since then, I've ended up going back to Colombia twice, especially to visit my host family. I went in 2017 and 2018. You can see here I went to see the wax palms in Cocoro Valley in the coffee region of Colombia. I'm there with my host family in the middle. There's Cartagena on the right. I went to Bogota in 2018. This is overlooking the city. And this is in Cartagena on the famous wall, walking along it, the beautiful colors and architecture there, and celebrating with friends at one of their host sites in Colombia, the ones that stayed. This encouraged me to go on my own trips. I decided to go to Mexico in 2017, one of my first trips on my own, and it was a life-changing experience. I loved it. I went to Puerto Rico truly on my own. Mexico, I did a tour group, but this Puerto Rico trip was all me, all planned, all by myself. I'm planning on going to Puerto Rico actually in February again. It's an amazing place. Absolutely loved it. This past summer, I did another tour through Central America. Went to Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and Costa Rica. And again, seeing those countries that I had dreamt of visiting and actually making that come true, saving lots of money to be able to do that was an incredible experience to me. It was definitely worth it. Another takeaway, language opens doors and connects people. I feel so fortunate and it's so amazing to me that because I've studied Spanish, I can talk to 500,000 more people. 500,000? 500 million? 500 million more people because I speak Spanish. I speak the same language as they do. And it makes me feel so much more independent because I have that freedom to go to Mexico and order coffee without getting confused or tell directions. I also connected with my students. On the end it says, La quiero Miss Eden, which means I love Miss Eden. One of my students, Spanish-speaking students, wrote that, and I took a picture. Also music, culture that I've absorbed. This is Daddy Yankee. I went to a music festival in Wisconsin Dells last summer. These are all just things that have enriched my life and connected me to people that I wouldn't have been able to connect to as easily had I not known Spanish. And one of my biggest takeaways was that quitting does not equal failure. And this is something that I kind of had to retrain my brain about because we're so often taught winners never quit and quitters never win, right? But as I was in that low in Colombia my last month, I read a book about that and really tried to change my mentality. Here it said, this is the Facebook post that I posted when I came home. Home sweet home. I had a wonderful time in Colombia, but I've decided it's time to come home. I'm excited to see what the next chapter holds because I literally have no idea. And so in that book about quitting, this really stood out to me. Winners quit all the time. They just quit the right stuff at the right time. And I am so, so thankful for my time in Colombia. Even though I did not fulfill the 27 months, even though I quit early, I had an amazing experience, and I know that I've met the Peace Corps goals through connecting with Colombians, and even now sharing with you and sharing with my friends and family to promote that cross-cultural competency. But to know that the experiences I've had in that time have also enriched my life. And so even though I quit, I'm not a loser. I'm still a winner. It wasn't a failure. And it was a wonderful experience. So thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. This is a very basic, overview of my experience, but I think we've got about 10 minutes if you would like to answer some questions. Oh, sure. Sure. All right. Any questions? Yes. The political situation was not too bad, honestly, especially compared to the movies and media that we see about the 90s with Pablo Escobar and all the cartels and the gangs. It really wasn't present that much at all, especially where I was. And that's purposeful placement by the Peace Corps. They put us in safer places. It was pretty stable. Right now, they've got a pretty conservative government, so things are kind of popping up again with that, but overall, pretty stable political situation, I'd say. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Right. I found that I enjoy the Spanish language content so much more. I love investigating those Latin American countries, especially, and being able to share that and incorporate my experiences has been more motivating to me than doing English. I guess I could tell those things, but the goal of English as a second language is more geared toward American English cultural competency, and so I just wanted to talk to my Spanish-speaking students of like, what was it like for you to live in Honduras? And that's good, but it's not the main goal of ESL. So with Spanish, I found that it to be much more interesting for me to plan, I would say. Yes. They did not. The daughter she took some English, but she'd be able to communicate some basic. Actually, their oldest daughter, who didn't live there, works for American Airlines, and she's very fluent in English. But the parents did not. And most of the families, we found that the families did not speak Spanish. So it was just more of a struggle for the lower level Spanish speakers, because we had some that came in at, well, you got novice, intermediate, and advanced. So like a novice level learners, they would really struggle. But there's a way to negotiate meaning and things. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Really? Wow. Yeah. Yes. Right. Wow. So a fellow volunteer. Did you stay the full term? 2 years? Close. Yes. They're okay. Okay. Wow. Well, if you didn't hear, she also served in Colombia in 1978. Okay. Right. Oh. Uh-huh. Okay, near Medellin. Okay. Wow. Thank you for coming. That's so neat. What other questions do you have for me? Yes. Oh, yes. They love soccer. It is the most popular for sure. They have soccer teams that are kind of equivalent to what our like football teams would be here. It's huge, very popular. Other questions? Yes. They haven't, because my host sister works for American Airlines. She's talked about coming to the U.S., but it hasn't happened yet. I think financially it's quite a burden, but they've talked about it. My host mom, though, she's afraid of flying, so I don't think she'll ever come. We'll see. I'm not sure about what the visa process would be, but they would have to apply and then be granted entrance, I guess. But, yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.